It's not by chance that you're viewing this video. There's a reason you're here. Everything is unfolding exactly as it should. Trust the timing of your life and know that you're being led to where you're meant to be. As you stumble on this video, perhaps not by chance, it will serve to awaken your spirit. You have endured battles that many others would not have survived. You have carried the weight of pain, betrayal, isolation, and misunderstanding. Yet you continued to move forward. You did not break. Instead, you chose to heal. As a result, you are no longer the person you once were. This transformation unsettles those around you. Their strange behavior stems from discomfort because your healing, your growth, and your inner peace now threaten the control they once held. The version of you that was easily manipulated and readily accessible no longer exists, and that realization frightens them. Let's go deeper. 7 powerful chapters to uncover the truth behind why your healing unsettles those who once held power over you. But before we dive into today's revelation, understand this. Chosen one, your healing terrifies them because they can no longer control you. This isn't just a message, it's a divine transmission. This is spiritual confirmation delivered straight to your soul. If these words have found you, it's not by coincidence. You were meant to receive this. Like, share, and subscribe. Not for vanity, but to spread this light. This is more than content. This is clarity. This is purpose. This is alignment. If your spirit resonates with this truth, drop 77 in the comments right now. That number is more than just digits. It's a sacred code, a divine signal to the Most High and the universe that you are awake, aligned, and boldly walking in the authority of your healing. Not everyone is ready for this level of truth. Not everyone will have the strength to make it to the end. But those who do, they are the truly chosen. They are the ones prepared to shatter old chains, perceive what was once hidden, and rise in a way that shakes the very foundations of the systems that tried to contain them. This message is not meant to be heard once and forgotten. It is living, it is layered, it is encoded with divine revelation. Each time you return, your spirit will absorb something deeper, something you may not have caught the first time. So replay it as many times as your soul calls for. Let this be your reminder. Your healing didn't make you weaker, it made you unstoppable. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. You found your voice. There was a time, chosen one, when silence felt like safety. You believed that keeping quiet was the only way to protect yourself. You learned to bury your emotions, not because they weren't real, but because expressing them felt dangerous. You let things slide, not because they didn't hurt, but because you feared the consequences of speaking up. You swallowed your truth, not because it wasn't worth hearing, but because it felt like no one was truly listening. You were taught, whether directly, subtly, or through painful experience, that using your voice made you difficult, that having needs made you needy, that setting boundaries made you cold or selfish, that telling your truth made you dramatic, disloyal, or ungrateful. So you learned to survive in silence, to endure in quiet, to shrink yourself just to keep the peace that was never real to begin with. But deep within, your spirit never stopped crying out. That inner voice, the one they tried to silence, never died. It waited. It grew stronger. And now, you're no longer afraid to speak. You found your voice, and with it, your power. You felt the dissonance in your spirit every time you tolerated something that clashed with your soul. Each time you said yes when you meant no, a part of you dimmed. The weight of pretending, of wearing a mask, of faking okay, grew heavier with every silent compromise. You hid your truth, not because it wasn't valid, but because you feared being misunderstood, labeled, or rejected. The silence that once felt like protection slowly transformed into a prison. But then, the healing began, quietly at first, gently. Maybe it arrived through solitude, when the noise of the world finally faded. Maybe it came wrapped in heartbreak, forcing you to confront everything you tried to outrun. Maybe it came through a spiritual awakening, a divine interruption that shook you awake. However it came, it cracked something open. And from that sacred crack, your voice emerged, not the one shaped by fear, but the one anchored in truth. the one that had always been waiting to be heard. Not the voice shaped by fear or trauma, but the voice rooted in truth. Not the voice that whispers just to survive, but the one that speaks with authority and clarity. Not the voice that bends to please others, but the one that rises to honor your soul. And when you began to speak, not everyone celebrated it. Some grew distant, some turned cold, some accused you of changing. And they were right. You did change. You transformed. You remembered who you are. Now, you no longer go along with what feels misaligned. You no longer shrink yourself to keep others comfortable. You no longer apologize for honoring your boundaries. And you refuse to sit in silence when disrespect, manipulation, or injustice enters the room. Because now, your voice is free. And with that freedom, you've become a force they can no longer control. You no longer force a smile when your spirit says no. Because here's the truth. Your voice doesn't just speak. It disrupts. It cuts through manipulation. It breaks cycles of control. It challenges the systems that once thrived in your silence. To those who were comfortable with your quiet compliance, your voice is a disruption, a threat. It signals that they no longer hold the power to define your reality. They can't guilt you. They can't shame you. They can't twist your words or use your silence as a weapon. And deep down, they know it. That's why they shift. That's why they pull away. That's why they label your strength as hostility, your truth as defiance, your clarity as arrogance. But you know better. You've reclaimed your power, and there's no turning back. But don't let that pull you back. Your voice is sacred. It carries the sound of your freedom, the sound of your return to your true self. And even if it shakes foundations or unsettles those around you, it must be heard. Your voice was never meant to be silenced. It was born to break chains, starting with your own. And now that you've found it, there's no returning to silence. Speak boldly, chosen one. Heaven recognizes your sound, and hell trembles when it hears you. Chapter 2. Your energy can no longer be drained. Before your healing, chosen one, your energy moved like an open river, wide, generous, and unguarded. You gave not out of obligation, but from the depths of a big heart, a compassionate spirit, and pure intentions. You wanted to help, to uplift, to be the steady presence others could rely on. You carried people, emotionally, spiritually, even financially, not realizing that many only knew how to take, never how to give. You poured yourself into others, trying to be the light in their darkness, even when no one stopped to ask if your own flame was fading. You were burning for everyone but yourself. You overextended yourself. You showed up when your body begged for rest. You answered calls you didn't have the strength to take. You endured disrespect just to protect the image of being the good one. You believed that loving others meant abandoning yourself. But here's the truth. Love doesn't require self-betrayal. Compassion shouldn't cost you your peace. And being good should never mean being empty. Many of the people you tried to save were never seeking salvation. They didn't want healing. They wanted access. They weren't after transformation. They craved attention. They didn't honor your energy. They fed on it. Your brokenness, your unhealed need to feel needed, made you vulnerable to those who saw your light not as something to respect, but something to consume. But that version of you is gone. Healing has sharpened your vision. You've become discerning. You now understand your energy is sacred currency, and not everyone has earned the right to be in its presence. You've learned that endlessly pouring into people who refuse to pour into themselves isn't compassion, it's self-neglect. You've come to understand that real love doesn't ask you to bleed to prove your care. Helping others should never come at the cost of harming yourself. Being needed is not the same as being valued. Now you move differently. You've built boundaries, not walls born from trauma, but gates protected by wisdom. You no longer say yes out of guilt. You don't engage in conversations that drain your spirit, and you certainly don't explain your worth to those committed to misunderstanding it. To those who once had unlimited access to your energy, your boundaries now feel like punishment. They feel shut out, powerless, confused. But what they're really feeling is the absence of control, because it's not just your presence they miss. They miss the version of you they could manipulate. The broken you, the overly giving you, the self-sacrificing, constantly available, apologetic version of you who put everyone else first. But that version of you no longer lives here. You've awakened. You're no longer moved by guilt trips. You're not chasing validation. And you're done trying to earn love through overgiving. You've unplugged from the false belief that being drained made you divine. You've stepped into a deeper truth. Your energy is divine and it must be protected. Yes, some people are uneasy now because the supply they once fed on is gone, and the new you, the healed you, comes with requirements, with standards, with discernment, with distance, and that makes you untouchable to those who once thrived on your vulnerability. They no longer have access, not because you're bitter, but because you're better, not because you're angry, but because you're awake. You finally understand. Protecting your energy isn't selfish, it's sacred. You're no longer addicted to being needed. You're devoted to being whole. And that alone makes you powerful in ways they may never fully comprehend. Keep your energy protected, chosen one. As you heal, your presence becomes a privilege, not a promise. Chapter 3, you no longer need their approval. Chosen one of the most powerful shifts in your healing journey happened the moment you realize this truth. You don't need anyone's approval to be who you are. There was a time when you were deeply entangled in the opinions of others. You lived in fear of being misunderstood, rejected, left out, or abandoned. So you tried to be perfect. You said the right things, wore the right masks, played the right roles. You bent over backward for people who barely noticed when you were drowning. Why? Because pain, patterns, and past trauma taught you that your worth had to be earned, that love had a price. You lived performing for acceptance, believing that if you did enough, proved enough, or changed enough, you'd finally be enough. And those around you, whether they realized it or not, used that against you. They didn't control you with chains, but with approval and disapproval, with the silent threat of withholding love, attention, or belonging. They created unspoken rules you were expected to follow. And every time you broke one, by being honest, different, or simply yourself, they made you feel like the problem. But then healing came, and it exposed the lie. Healing taught you that you don't need anyone's permission to be whole, that your worth isn't up for debate, that your value has nothing to do with how well you fit into someone else's comfort zone. Healing revealed the truth. Approval rooted in control isn't love, it's manipulation. Now you move with quiet confidence. You no longer ask, "Is this okay?" before honoring your truth. You no longer explain yourself to those determined to misunderstand you. You no longer wait for someone else to validate your calling, your vision, or your presence. You walk into rooms with your head held high, not because you believe you're better, but because you finally understand you're not less. And that shift, it shakes people. Those who once held power over you can feel it slipping. Because when someone no longer craves approval, they become a threat to systems built on fear and control. You've reclaimed your power. You no longer chase acceptance, you choose alignment. You're not seeking applause, you're tuned into your assignment. You're no longer afraid to stand alone, not if it means standing in truth. And those who once tried to control you with silence, side eyes, backhanded compliments, or conditional love, they don't know what to do with this version of you. Because this version isn't needy. This version doesn't shrink to fit. This version doesn't settle for crumbs just to feel seen. This version of you is free, and yes, it unsettles them. Because you no longer dance to their tune, you're no longer accessible through guilt, you're unmoved by their cold stares and veiled critiques, you no longer need their approval to validate your light. And the truth is, they were never the source of your worth. God was. God is. And now that you know that, their grip is gone. Their control is broken. Their opinions, irrelevant in the light of your divine calling. So keep walking in boldness, chosen one. Keep standing firm in your worth. Let them be uncomfortable with your freedom, because that discomfort is proof that you're finally living in truth. Chapter 4. You started loving yourself, the chosen one. One of the most powerful and radical parts of your healing has been learning how to truly love yourself. Not the performative kind of love, the kind that looks good on the outside while you're quietly tearing yourself apart inside. No, this love is real. It's rooted. It's the kind that blooms after you've made it through things that were meant to break you. You didn't always know how to do this. For a long time, you believed love had to be earned, that it had to come from someone else. So you kept striving, kept trying to prove your worth, kept giving and giving until there was nothing left for yourself. But slowly, everything began to shift. You turned inward. You stopped abandoning yourself. You started showing up for you. And in doing so, you discovered something extraordinary. You were never unworthy. You were never too much or not enough. You were always the one you were waiting for. You used to criticize yourself for not being further along. You blamed yourself for things that were never yours to carry. You accepted treatment that didn't reflect your worth, because deep down, a part of you questioned whether you even had any. And others noticed. Some people benefited from your self-doubt. They preferred you unsure, disconnected from your power. Because when you didn't love yourself, you were easier to guilt, easier to control, easier to use. You kept trying to earn love, kept trying to prove you were enough. You poured yourself into fixing what you didn't break, healing relationships that were never meant to be your burden. You overextended, you overcompensated, you over-apologized, not because you were wrong, but because you felt unworthy. But not anymore. Your healing changed everything. You began to listen to your soul, to your body, to the quiet wisdom within. You started speaking to yourself with kindness instead of criticism. You forgave yourself for what you didn't know, for what you accepted, for all the years you were hardest on yourself. You stopped chasing those who ran. Instead, you began to seek peace. Now, you rest, not out of laziness, but because you finally understand rest is a right, not a reward. You say no, not to punish, but to protect. Your boundaries are no longer negotiable. You walk away from chaos, not because you're cold, but because your heart has earned calm. And this kind of self-love, it's radical. It disrupts everything that depended on your silence, your guilt, your self-abandonment. It threatens every system, every dynamic that once thrived on you neglecting yourself. There were people who once fed on your insecurity, who depended on your need for approval, who kept you small with criticism, dressed as honesty, and doubt masked as concern. But everything's different now. Now that you're loving yourself, their words don't hit the same. Their disapproval no longer shakes your foundation. Their silence no longer leaves you questioning your worth. Their absence no longer feels like a loss, because your love for yourself has become your anchor. You're no longer chasing their validation to feel whole. You've stopped asking for permission to feel good about who you are. You've reclaimed that power, and you're not giving it back. You're no longer bending over backwards to be chosen. You're not chasing validation or proving your worth. You're embodying it. And yes, that unsettles some people, because when you start loving yourself, you stop playing the roles they assigned you. You stop accepting watered-down love and conditional acceptance. You stop being easy to manipulate. They don't quite know what to do with this version of you, the one who stands tall, who protects her peace, who understands that being whole doesn't mean being everything to everyone. You're no longer self-destructing just to keep others comfortable, and that scares them. You're not over-giving to earn love, and that confuses them. You're not shrinking to fit, and that threatens them. Because now, you've remembered who you are, and you're no longer apologizing for it. Chapter 5. You expose their shadow without saying a word, chosen one. One of the most unexpected and powerful outcomes of your healing journey is this. It became a mirror, not just for you, but for everyone around you. Without raising your voice, without making a single announcement, your growth began to reflect what others were still hiding. Because healing doesn't always make noise. It's not always a grand performance. Sometimes it's as subtle as choosing peace over chaos, as simple as no longer engaging in what drains you, as quiet as walking away from what once held power over you. And in that quiet, something incredible happened. Your transformation began to reveal the places others refused to look in themselves. Sometimes it's as subtle as walking away from dysfunction instead of getting pulled into it. It's the calm in your spirit, the clarity in your eyes, the way you now move with quiet confidence and unwavering intention. To you, it might feel simple, natural even, but to others, it's deeply confronting. You didn't have to preach. You didn't have to point fingers or expose anyone's darkness. Just by rising, you illuminated the shadows they've worked hard to keep hidden. Your peace amplifies their chaos. Your boundaries reveal their lack of discipline. Your self-love casts a light on their self-neglect. Your truth disrupts their denial. Your healing reflects the pain they've refused to face. And that's the power of transformation. It speaks without a sound, but it's impossible to ignore. For some, your transformation is too much. Not because it simply inspires, but because it exposes. It exposes their bitterness, their envy, their resistance to growth, their attachment to dysfunction, their comfort in wearing the victim's mask. So they pull away, not because you've wronged them, but because your presence stirs what they've spent years trying to silence. They say, "You've changed." But what they really mean is, you no longer make it easy for them to stay the same. Your evolution disrupted their illusion. And that discomfort, that's not yours to carry. They say you're different now, but what they really mean is that you've stopped shrinking yourself to make them feel bigger. They say you're too much, but what they're truly saying is that you've become a mirror they're not ready to face. You never set out to expose them. You didn't choose to be a reflection. But when you rise in your truth, when you walk in authenticity, when you choose healing over hiding, your presence naturally reveals everything around you that isn't rooted in what's real. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Not everyone wants to heal. Some people are more attached to preserving their image than pursuing their growth. They would rather remain in the narrative where they're the victim, where nothing is ever their fault, and where the responsibility to change always belongs to someone else. So when you show up healed, honest, and whole, it's like switching on a light in a room full of hidden shadows. The light doesn't lie. The light doesn't attack. It simply reveals. And that's exactly what your life is doing now, revealing. Your healing is quietly exposing their avoidance, not through confrontation, but through clarity. Not through force, but through presence. Your discipline highlights their excuses. Your authenticity unmasks their performance. And it is not your responsibility to dim your light just to make others more comfortable in the dark. Let them feel what they feel. Let them say what they say, because the truth is their discomfort in your presence has nothing to do with you and everything to do with what remains unhealed within themselves. Chapter 6, you're no longer reactive, and that's powerful. Chosen one. One of the clearest signs that your healing is real, deep, and lasting is this. You've become calm. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because you became stronger. You've stepped into a space where you're no longer easily triggered, no longer pulled into chaos, no longer feeling the need to respond to everything that tries to provoke you. Before your healing, everything felt personal. Every comment cut deep, every rejection echoed old wounds. Every ounce of resistance felt like an attack. But now, you've reclaimed your power, not by fighting, but by choosing peace. Every side comment, every shady look, every unanswered message, you absorbed it all. Your heart took on the weight of every slight, every dismissal, every silence. You constantly felt the need to defend your name, explain your choices, justify your worth, and prove your intentions. You reacted, not from peace, but from fear, from insecurity, from the unhealed belief that your value depended on how others perceived you. You wanted closure. You craved understanding. You longed to be seen and heard by people who were never willing to listen, never capable of looking beyond the narrow lens of their own ego. That desire to be understood made you vulnerable. Some people fed off your reactivity. They knew exactly how to push your buttons, how to say just the right thing to throw you off center. For them, drama was a tool to dominate. Conflict was a strategy to confuse. They would stir chaos just to provoke a reaction, because your emotional response gave them a false sense of power. But now, you've changed. You don't match energy. You protect your own. You don't argue with foolishness. You walk away from it. You don't chase closure. You cultivate peace within yourself. You don't over-explain. You let your presence and actions speak louder than words. And that, chosen one, is true power. That is spiritual maturity. When you stop reacting, People lose their hold on you. When you stop defending yourself, they can no longer shape the narrative. When you stop explaining, you remove yourself from the drama they rely on to feel in control. Your silence is no longer a sign of weakness, it's a sign of wisdom. Your stillness isn't avoidance, it's alignment. Your calm isn't performative, it's earned. You've become emotionally untouchable, not because you've hardened, but because you've healed. You now understand not every insult deserves a response. Not every accusation is worth your energy. Not every relationship needs to be repaired, and not every storm requires your presence. And here's the truth. Those who only knew how to connect with you through chaos are now confused by who you've become. The ones who once fed off your emotional reactions now feel starved. The ones who use guilt, gaslighting, or manipulation to control you now stand powerless because their tactics no longer reach you. You've evolved. You've upgraded from reacting to responding, from defending to discerning, from merely surviving to standing in your sovereignty. Now you pause, you pray, you process, you choose. You no longer move from pain, you move from purpose. And that makes you a threat to the systems and people who once thrived on your emotional instability. They can't reach you anymore because you're no longer on the same frequency. You're not moved by provocation, you're grounded in peace. You're not shaken by rumors, misunderstandings, or shade. You're rooted in truth. This level of calm can't be faked. It can't be performed. It can only be accessed by those who have done the deep, honest, inner work. So let them wonder about your silence. Let them talk when you choose not to respond. Let them be unsettled by the peace they can't disrupt. Because while they're busy trying to drag you back into old battles, you're focused on building a new life. One where your energy is protected, your emotions are grounded, and your power is no longer available for negotiation. Chapter 7. You remembered who you are. Chosen one. The most dangerous, revolutionary, and liberating act you ever committed was the simple yet profound moment when you remembered who you truly are. Not the version of yourself that was shaped by trauma, molded by hardship, or distorted by pain. Not the identity that suffering handed to you, nor the mask you were forced to wear in order to survive. No, you remembered the truth, the divine truth. The truth that was written over your life long before you were ever born. You remembered the version of yourself that was formed in light, not darkness, the one crafted with sacred intention, chosen with purpose, and destined for meaning. And now that you have remembered who you truly are, you can no longer be manipulated as you once were. You are no longer vulnerable to guilt, confined by the expectations of others, or shattered by opinions that once held the power to paralyze you. Your identity is no longer something borrowed, shaped by external forces or fleeting validation. It is now firmly rooted, anchored in truth and clarity. You have come to understand that you were never weak. Rather, you were simply weary from carrying burdens you were never meant to bear. You were not lost. You were being led, guided through a process of becoming. You were not broken. You were in the process of breaking free. They may have tried to tell you who you should be and convince you of all that you were not. But now, you know better. You remember the truth. But healing came, and with it, every lie that had once taken root within you was rewritten. In the light of that healing, you remembered, not just who you are, but why you are here. You are chosen, sent into this world on a divine assignment. Your worth was never something to be questioned or debated. Your light was never meant to ask for permission to shine. And it was that realization, the profound remembering of your truth, that made you untouchable. You now walk in truth, no longer weighed down by the need to prove your value. You move with clarity, no longer distracted by the noise of external approval. You speak with authority, grounded in the certainty of who you are. You live with confidence, anchored in purpose and identity, and that, quite naturally, unsettles people. Not because you became someone entirely different, but because you finally awakened. They had grown comfortable with the broken version of you, the one who constantly sought validation, who questioned their worth, and who dimmed their light to keep others comfortable. But that version no longer exists. But this healed version of you, the one who no longer flinches when people withdraw, manipulate, or attempt to control, is the version that terrifies them. You no longer participate in the games that once drained your spirit. You no longer chase those who are unwilling to see your value, nor do you feel the need to explain or justify your worth to anyone incapable of recognizing it. You have become unshakable, not because you have achieved perfection, but because you are now deeply rooted in purpose. Your strength does not come from ego or pride. It flows from a grounded understanding of your true identity. You have stepped into your power, not to dominate, but to embody who you were always meant to be. And as a result, those who once connected with you only through shared pain, suffering, or brokenness can no longer reach you, not because you pushed them away, but because you have outgrown that chapter of your life. You have ascended beyond the version of yourself that needed to be rescued. Now you walk in wholeness. You remember now, you are set apart. You were never meant to blend in or conform. Your spirit carries the essence of royalty. You are not here to live in chains or submit to cycles of bondage. You are here to break them. You are the cycle breaker, the bearer of light, the one chosen, not by accident, but by divine design, to rise above limitation and lead with purpose. And when a chosen one remembers who they are, everything begins to shift, because nothing unsettles darkness more than a person who has awakened fully to their true identity. You are no longer here to be controlled, to shrink yourself to fit into places you have outgrown, or to silence your truth for the comfort of others. You are not here to be passive. You are here to transform yourself, your lineage, your environment, and even the world around you. You are no longer moving aimlessly or surviving in confusion. You are walking in divine alignment now, led by purpose, anchored in truth, and ignited by a calling greater than yourself. And those who once held power over your pain, those who once manipulated your wounds and controlled your narrative, can no longer touch your power. That season has ended. You are awake now. You are aligned with truth and purpose. There is no going back to what once confined you. The only path is forward, forward in grace, in authority, and in divine fire. Chosen one, let them be afraid. Let them tremble. Not because you seek vengeance, but because your healing was never about them. It was always for you, for your freedom, for your purpose, and for your peace. God did not bring you through the fire, through the valley, through the pain, just to watch you return to the bondage you were once rescued from. You are no longer someone who can be controlled by fear, guilt, or manipulation. You are whole now, healed from the inside out, and your light shines far too brightly to ever be dimmed again. So keep healing, keep rising, keep walking in truth and power, and if they are afraid of the light, let them be. Because the light they never saw coming, the brilliance they tried to bury, was always you. And if you're still hungry for more chapters to this journey, or a visual concept for a video or thumbnail, just say the word. I'm here and ready to help bring it all to life. Thanks for watching. Here ends this video. Take a moment to like, share, and subscribe if you find this video interesting.